Hi, I'm Barbara Emodi, the author of Sew the Garment Making Book of Knowledge, and I want to talk to you about my new book, which is called Stress-Free Sewing Solutions. And I want to tell you a little bit about the backstory, why I decided to write that book, and what you will find in it. This book is really the result of feedback I got from my first book, which was people who, appreciated the technical advice, that the projects, very specific bits that I had interspersed through that book, wanted more of that. But more than that, it was a feeling that I was picking up from many sewers, that they were trying so hard to improve their sewing and often frustrated. And I thought, you know what, there's too much stress. Sewing is a joy. Sewing adds so much to your life. Clothes are wonderful. It's great to make your own that are exactly what you want and make you feel beautiful when you wear them and you've enjoyed the process of creating them. And I thought, well, what's the missing piece? What can I do to reduce the stress factor in the sewing process? So once, a long time ago, a student in one of my classes said to me, "Oh, you know so much, you must have trained in Paris." And I wanted to say to her, and in fact I probably did say to her, no, I didn't train in France. I do have some formal training in sewing, but what I have is behind me is a mountain of about 10,000 garments that I have struggled with and made mistakes with and learned from, and that's been my real education. So I decided in this book to really look at areas of sewing that many people worried about and have trouble with. Shirt collars, that little bump at the top of where the shirt placket joins the collar, continuous laps, the cuffs on blouses, necklines, bound necklines in ribbing and in other knit fabrics, and also just knit bindings in general. I thought about that. I thought about, V-necks and tab fronts and golf shirts. I thought about waistbands, and I thought in so many of these areas there is an easier way to do it than perhaps you're reading the instructions. So I came up with an acronym, my first acronym in my life, called a FAIL. Followed all instructions, let down. Because most of us have learned to sew from instructions. We follow instructions very carefully, and sometimes, despite having done that, we have results that really we're not happy with, and we don't know why. The reason is a lot of those instructions are classical, conventional ways of doing things, but they don't take into account particular fabrics, particular patterns, or particular you. We all have ways that make most sense to us individually with our hands and the way we understand problems and the way we handle fabric. And I wanted to basically help people who were let down and do two things. One is, okay, didn't turn out the way you want. This is how we can fix it and rescue it in a really nice way. Or if that for some reason isn't possible, the next time you do that detail, I'm going to show you a really stress-free way of doing it. And often those stress-free ways are a little bit about breaking down a long, complicated, what I call a presto changeo process. You sew it all on the wrong side, you turn it to the right side, and it's perfect. Long, complicated seams. Breaking it down into manageable parts, just like life. You just take it one thing at a time and don't try to think too far ahead, and you know what, it'll work out. So I'm going to just show you a couple of the garment ideas. So this is by no means everything that's in the book. The book is quite extensive in detail. But just to give you some sense of just the general things I'm talking about. I start the book off with ribbings and necklines. This is one that lies really nicely. Often people have trouble with this, that gapes in the front or it twists, and there's a formula and there's an approach that really works. So that's near the beginning of the book. I also talk about bindings. This is a dress that has a self fabric knit binding, and often these can bow or be too bulky, wave can be quite difficult, and there's just such an easy way to do it. And I try to give you a menu of possibilities. I also go into something that that I sew a lot, which is the polo neck, the golf shirt. Again, this is very simple. This doesn't have a facing in the back, it's bound, but it's really easy to do if you know how to kind of avoid the pitfalls. So I've made a lot of these. I really enjoy that part of the book myself. So I've even shown you another one. I think I wore this last week. Again, so easy to do and so much simpler than I think in many of the instructions that you might read. I also have dealt with zippers, a whole variety of zippers. And one example here would be a zipper in a top like this one, where the zipper lands just in a flat piece of fabric. This can be kind of worrying. Anything where you cut down the middle of a garment to put something in, you really want it to work. That little box at the bottom's got to be square and even. And again, there's an easy way to do it. And I have shown you how to fix it if there's a problem, and how to do it again in a less stressful way. Shirts. The example in the book, or one of the examples, is my son-in-law is wearing it, so we're not going to see that, but the collar. This is a beautifully easy way to do a collar. So look at how that's nice and simple, not bulky. A lot of the methods you'll find described involve a lot of twisting and rolling. It's quite difficult, and there's just a simple way to do it. So I really have shown you how to do that. And of course, because we're on shirts, the placket here. Now the continuous lap placket, I also talk about how to do a shirt, a man's proper, the tower placket. Well, that's in the book as well, but I think for a lot of us, when we sew a lot of blouses, we're told to do a continuous lap, which is a very complicated, multi-layer detail in a very small area. And I have a 5-minute alternative that's here. I'm so happy with it. That is so simple and so stress-free. So that is one of my favorite chapters. Also V-necklines. I wear a lot of them. And my crossover V, this is actually from my first book, but I've used it here because I really like the stripes. I go into this in a little more detail. That's a V neckline that actually crosses over. It's really simple to do. But for those of you who want a mitered V, this is a t-shirt. The mitered V is the V with the line up in the middle. I have a nice flat way of actually drafting a pattern to put that in a really simple operation. So I've covered that, and I've also dealt with the lower body as well, specifically waistbands, and often an elastic waistband or a waistband with a zipper in the back. You know that you pull the zipper and you've got a waistband on the top. Sometimes you end up with a little gap there. There's a really simple solution to dealing with that. So I'm really happy to share that, because that is something in particular I had a lot of trouble with myself for years. But these are leggings. I'm going to show you I'll show you how to put in a stitched in waistband. I don't like elastic waistbands unless I have to use them where the elastic can spin around in a casing. So this is a double stitched one. If you understand this application, you actually can make any swimsuit as well. And then my favorite waistband for knit garments in particular is one where there's absolutely no stitching showing. And this is the most comfortable waist you can use. So I've covered that. I've done buttons, buttonholes, there's a really easy way to make a bound buttonhole. And a bound buttonhole is something you really need in your repertoire if you're working with a heavy fabric. And I have 2 really foolproof methods for bound buttonholes. Also, how to perfect your machine buttonholes. And if you have one that you're not crazy about in your machine, how to actually make a machine buttonhole by adjusting the settings manually. I think that's a really good trick to have in your toolbox. And finally, hems. I will introduce you to some hems that maybe are a little unfamiliar, like a bound hem, which is perfect for light fabrics. And just so many of my tricks. I've opened my bag of tricks, and hopefully some of these techniques won't resonate with you, and that's fine with me. I am adding to my bag of tricks. Even since I've written the book, I'm coming up with more ideas. But hopefully you'll find a couple of things there that you will say, oh, this is so much easier, and you'll approach that job with more enjoyment and less stress when you sew. And if you do that, my job is done. Thank you.